man, if there's a new opportunity that's presented to you, if there's a new opportunity to go and meet new people, go to a new place, discover a new thing, um, say yes. You're just growing your perspective. You're growing your network. I can't emphasize that enough. You're growing your resume because when you're 22, yeah, you'll have a degree at 22 or 23, but what have you done? Who do you know? Who are your references?
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Enjoy College on Purpose. This is a podcast that's all about helping people make the most of college. My name is Ish, and one of the things that I know about college students is college students are really, really busy. And so, what I want to do with this podcast is I want to make the most of your time and try and keep this podcast right around 25 minutes. In that time, I'm actually bringing in a very dear friend of mine and someone who has spent a lot of time in the higher education sector as a professional. My guest today is Eric Hinton, and we'll jump into Eric's credentials and his story here in a little bit. I actually met Eric as a higher ed professional when I was a college student myself. And in the years since, Eric, man, I'm just amazed at how you not only were able to care for me and mentor me throughout those years, but then we've made the transition into a peer level where literally you are one of my closest friends now. Eric, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. How are you doing, man?
Doing well, man. I appreciate you having me on here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Eric, just spent about a minute or so speaking about what you're up to these days professionally, and also in that, if you could speak into what your connection is to the higher education system.
Sure. I work in real estate right now. I've been in real estate for about 4 years. I really enjoy that. I'm a mentor with my church, direct a faith-based initiative, do some life coaching. So my job is real estate, but that's not really my passion. My passion is pouring into young adults and into others. And so real estate funds that. I've been blessed to be very successful in that. So that's what I do for a living, but I really enjoy investing in particularly young adults. I find that that's really the niche that I feel compelled to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that we talk about this podcast, or at least a value that I try to promote. This concept of like whatever your professional endeavor is, don't just necessarily make it to be something where you're just gonna go make money or give yourself away from a 9 to 5. Like, what's it look like for your professional background to support your passion, your calling, your
Yeah.
purpose in life? And you're certainly somebody who has jumped into that and leverages your professional circumstances to live out your life value. And in all of that, one of the things that I know about you is, like I said, we got connected in the higher education space. At first, you were a resident director. Somewhere in all that, you were also like in admissions and enrollment, and eventually worked your way into student life. And so, Eric, I'd love it if you take a quick minute or so and just kind of give us an overview of what did your experience as a higher educational professional look like?
Sure. So when I began my career, I was in youth ministry, actually. And it was because of the network that I had built in my college experience myself. And one of my mentors, he just let me know that there was a job opening at a small private college in the admissions office. And when I looked into it, man, it had so many of the values that I hold dear, investing into young adults, being a part of their journey at a very transformational time. I mean, look, when you're 18 to 24, that is a foundational time in your life where you're setting up the trajectory for the rest of your life. That's where you're beginning to decide for yourself your core values, your core truths that you believe and you hold dear. They happen right at that juncture. So when my mentor told me about this opportunity, man, I jumped on it. You mentioned briefly I was a resident director, so your listeners need to know that I lived with you when you were in college, and I got stories. So they can just hit me up, let me know. I've got plenty of great stories about Ish, much to his chagrin, but So I started in admissions and I worked there for about 5 years. Then I went into student development, which was really my passion, helping students be successful, uh, establishing experiences and opportunities for students, whether that's professional development or co-curricular activities. So then I was the dean of students at that college for 8 years, and some of the best experiences of my life were there working with students.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you're kind of hinting at this concept of like being in the front lines of enrollment and admissions, seeking out high school students and
Yeah,
people who would be interested in the offerings of Dallas Christian College. But then you eventually transition into student development, like once you're already in the college and how to make that experience the most that you can. And so I'm really curious, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but in your mind, were there any consistent trends or practices or things to note when it came to students who excelled in their higher education experience?
sure, sure. I'll tell you, the students that I observed who were successful, that had gratifying experience in college, but not only that, like would launch out after college with a lot of energy, a lot of high potential for success, were students that looked outside of themselves while they were there, while they were doing this higher ed experience. They continually looked for opportunities um, to look outside themselves. They would say yes to new experiences, new opportunities, even some of those things that initially made them feel uncomfortable. They would look outside themselves. And listen, it's easy to be selfish in college. What I've learned is it's easy to be selfish anytime, isn't it? But in college, you are experiencing new freedoms, new liberties, new responsibilities for the first time. But when my students would look for ways to serve in their communities, whether that's nonprofits or youth groups or like hospice service, those were the students that I saw who stretched themselves, who grew in their perspectives, who grew their networks, who broadened themselves by experiencing those new things. And they are the ones who really had the greatest success and the greatest satisfaction in their experience.
Immediately in my head, when I'm thinking about the experience of getting started in college, I'm recalling a lot of the freedom that I first got to experience as a college student. Having my own space, my own room. I'm living in a different city than my parents are. And so it's certainly very attractive, very easy to almost have an inward focus
Mm-hmm.
uh, in my college experience just because of this newfound freedom. And yet at the same time, I remember in student orientation, one of the things you and your staff had us do is get some exposure to some different nonprofits, different communities, different things going on outside of the college campus to broaden our perspective, to get us connected, and to look outside of ourselves. I still remember the very first weekend that you had us go visit a church. And then before I knew it, I found myself hanging out with middle school students for 4 years. And it started at new student orientation, but this value that you're highlighting right now of look outward, don't just give in to this inward perspective of your college experience. So I
Yeah,
really appreciate you mentioning
yeah.
that. You know, one other question I kind of wanted to hit on is we like to talk about the college experience as something that ought to be memorable. It's so consistent, so common for students to view the college experience as, hey, I'm just here to get a piece of paper. It's the gateway into the rest of my professional life. But there's so many experiences, so much value to be found in the college experience, whether it's socially or serving or something like that. So the question that I would want to put out in front of you is, could you mention maybe one or two of the most memorable things you ever saw students engage in that helped make their college experience memorable?
Oh man, sure. Yeah, and if I can make a plug, as your listeners are considering where they want to invest those next few years and a lot of money, my encouragement is to go to the Student Development Center, the Student Success Department, find out what services are offered because, like you said, college is far, far more than the academic experience.
Mm.
That's a huge component, your credentialing, if you will, your diploma. But man, college is about the experiences that this institution is going to offer. What kind of opportunities are they going to set before you relationally, professionally, so that you can develop and really broaden your mind, expand yourself? That's a huge question to ask, not just what is a social scene like? Is this a party school? Am I going to have fun? Look, you're going to have fun in college. College is an amazing time in life. But where can you go that is going to very intentionally give you opportunities to broaden yourself? So, man, one of the best kind of collection of memories I had was when I would direct our international service trips. I got the pleasure of setting up about 6 trips a year where we would send students all over the world. We'd connect them with different nonprofits, different missionaries or humanitarian aid organizations, and so we would send students to Mexico, Guatemala, the Philippines, Nepal, Europe, and I got to be a part of quite a few of those trips because I directed the program, so I got to pick which trip I got to go on. And man, watching students grapple with new experiences, watching them go, why do they do it that way?
Mm.
Well, now that I think about it, why do we do it the way we do it? Man, that's next level. When you're investigating in other people, and you say, man, why do they do it like that? That's the first level of learning. But when you can turn around and go, well, why do we do it the way we do it? That's when you're really learning, man. That's when you really stretch. That's when you really are discovering who you really are and what makes you that way. And so, man, cross cultural experiences were huge for my students, and that was the biggest joy I had in higher ed was watching and enabling my students to have those cross cultural opportunities.
Yeah, no, and I absolutely love what you're suggesting right now. I know for me, one of the biggest things I always like to communicate to college students or any space that I can get into is to foster a sense of curiosity.
Yeah,
Man, the college experience is by far one of the best and safest places to experiment and hone in on your curiosity skill set. You know, to expose yourself to different experiences, different backgrounds, different
absolutely.
cultures, engage in cross cultural experiences. I want to talk to maybe Eric Hinton, the college student, a little bit. So, certainly, it, throughout your experience as a higher ed professional, and even now as a realtor, I mean, that's entrepreneurship, running your own business, pipeline of clients. I mean, you've learned a lot since your time in college. What's one thing? What is one thing you know now that you wish 18, 19-year-old Eric knew going into college?
Oh man, when I was 18 and 19, I was just trying to have as much fun as I could. I was never shy on trying new experiences. The one thing I didn't value at the time was the people that I interacted with. And man, the people that I'm building that network with in college, those people are a part of my life for, dude, we're talking decades to come, not years to come, decades, where I might come back around 20 years later and have an interaction or a relationship with someone that I had in college. And it, it highlighted the importance of investing in those relationships. That's something I've always appreciated about you, Ish, is man, you really cultivate relationships. You're a compassionate listener. I really envy that about you. Man, you have a strong knack to when you're speaking with someone in conversation, you're engaging the next question, and listening and considering and responding to what they're saying. And man, if I could go back and talk to myself in college, I would say, look, these relationships that you're building with staff and faculty, with other students, those are what life is about. I mean, those are going to be the elements that I draw from for the rest of my life. So, man, don't take those relationships for granted. Every relationship that you come across could potentially years from now have far reaching implications. So, that's something that has always stood out to me.
Totally, totally. And I appreciate you mentioning the kind words. Just hearing you describe your experience, I can certainly recognize how, when you were dorm director at in the residence that I lived in, you certainly championed. I remember, truthfully, I don't think I used the word networking a lot in my own vocabulary until you started to just hint at that value and the good that can come from that. To me, it was just making friends, making connections. But I was like, oh wow, there's certainly a value here. And just as a small peek, I mean, this podcast, we're only 8 episodes in, and yet, gosh, every last one of those has been a connection from my personal experience in college. It's just networking, taking those relationships seriously, literally relationships that are decades old now. And what's awesome about it is I made these connections in college, and we all grew up, and we're all doing awesome things now with our lives. It's just like, hey man, like I look through my personal contact list and I'm like, I've got some pretty gangster connections here. I need to start a podcast and just start asking people questions. But it starts, with this value of like taking those relationships seriously and engaging in that process. I guess maybe one final question for you. You've got a college student today, 18-year-old kid about to get started in college, and down the line, down their trajectory, they are looking at being a business owner, a business major, similar to what you're doing as a realtor. What would you say to that kid? A piece of advice to make the most of college, knowing that what awaits for them down the line is, hey man, you're going to be a business owner. You're going to be running your own thing. What do you pass on to them to make the most of their college experience right now?
Yeah. My encouragement for college students is be a yes man, be a yes woman. Man, we always hear that we don't want to be a yes man. Learn to say no. Dude, in my experience, the students that said no a whole bunch weren't the ones that were successful. When an opportunity comes up, when an experience comes up, say yes, grab onto it. You have to be wise. You have to say yes appropriately. You can't overburden yourself by saying yes to too much. But that wasn't the problem that I saw. I saw students get burned out because they said yes to too much of the wrong thing, just staying up all night with their friends and not getting rest. They said yes to procrastinating or whatever. But man, if there's a new opportunity that's presented to you, if there's a new opportunity to go and meet new people, go to a new place, discover a new thing, say yes. You're just growing your perspective. You're growing your network. I can't emphasize that enough. You're growing your resume, because when you're 22, yeah, you'll have a degree at 22 or 23, but what have you done? Who do you know? Who are your references? They better not be your friends. They better be people that you've had powerful experiences with, who are ahead of you in the journey. That's resume material. So, man, I tell all my students, I tell my own kids, if you're weighing whether or not to go to a thing, it's Friday night, you've got a thing that's been presented to you, some kind of event, some kind of banquet or a service opportunity. What are your alternatives? You could go to this thing, or you can stay home and play video games. Which alternative are you going to remember 6 months from now? Which activity are you going to remember having done 2 years from now, 6 years from now? Go do that one. And a lot of times I see young people forsaking really powerful experiences because, well, I'm tired, I'm just going to stay home tonight. man, take a 5 hour energy and go do that thing. When you are a college student and you don't yet have the blessing of a family and the blessing of a full-time job, you have a real blessing to go do an experience. And so, man, my encouragement for people who want to grow as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, is go experience things. Go say yes. Take the trip. Go do it. Go grab that experience. Start stacking up experiences and investing in relationships. That is going to make you a more well-rounded person. You're going to have more relational savvy. You're going to start building that emotional intelligence that you just can't do if you're just, I don't know if I want to, so I'm going to do nothing instead. If your alternative is, I don't know, I'm just going to stay home and do nothing, go do the thing.
You know, one thing I really appreciate about you, because I know for me, I've always been a person who challenges college students to certainly like learn to say no and know what's worthy of your yes. But you said something that really just kind of hit me in a very powerful way. You kept saying stacking up these opportunities, or the other way that I kind of heard it was, at the end of the day, find a way to make sure that your yeses at the end of the day outweigh your nos. It's certainly great to have these values in mind of not saying yes to the wrong things or figuring out what to say no to, and yet at the same time, man, lean into this experience. If it is something new, a banquet, a service opportunity, going out with a group of friends, at the end, like maybe it does suck, but you didn't lose anything. As opposed to like, what if it's a hit? What if it's a hit? It creates a memory, creates an experience, creates a connection that, as you suggested, throughout this college experience, we make connections that last decades. And a lot of times these connections, these experiences start with, saying yes on a Friday night, saying yes to an early Saturday morning thing.
Look, the worst thing that could possibly happen is you go and it's not a great experience. You just, maybe you waste an hour or you waste a morning. Okay, so what? Not everything that you do is going to be a home run. But listen, over time, those experiences and those encounters are going to be what you can stand up on in your career, in your social networking. As you build your resume, those experiences are going to be critical. So yeah, you've got to say yes to the right things, but you just have to say yes. And that's been my experience, compelling students to do it. When in doubt, do it.
Yeah. Eric, we really appreciate you being on the podcast today. Last question. If anybody in our audience wanted to connect with you, what would be the best way for people to reach out and get connected with you?
The best way would be email. And it's just my name. My middle name is Wayne. So it's eric.w.hinton, Hinton, @gmail.com. And I'd be happy to connect with you.
Eric Wayne, I'm so glad you acknowledge that. That is my favorite thing to call you in the world. Eric, once again, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
My pleasure, sir.
Yeah, and to all our listeners, thanks for listening to this episode. I do have one big request for you. Would you please leave a rating or a comment for the podcast on the platform that you're listening to? This is actually really, really helpful for us as we spread the word, try and overcome the algorithms, and trying to help as many people as possible. Thanks again for listening, and we will see you next time.